Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist, and it is time for the TT Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. Yes, I'm back from vacation. How y'all been doing? I almost forgot how to do this thing. I hadn't introduced it in so long. But we are back in business. It is August. A lot of you have kiddos who have started school already, or you may be making some transitions, doing different things in your life right now. So I will be turning 50. I keep telling everybody half a century. I don't know. It just seems kind of cool to have lived half a century. That's just me. Some people dread it. I'm looking forward to it. But as I am making that transition to get ready to turn 50 in a couple of months, I was thinking about just that transitions, right? So, what are the things that we experience in life that cause us to transition into different phases? And why not address it while I'm talking about the birthday and getting ready? So I felt like that would be a good topic for this series. And that's what we're going to do. We are going to get into talking about transitions. So I don't even remember, it might have been a week or so ago. I'll go on these deep dives where something will be interesting to me and I want to find out more about it. And so I grew up listening to 80s and 90s music, and there was a really popular group, H Town, when I was in high school. And one of the members of the group actually was killed in a car accident. That was Kevin Dino Connor. Him and his brother were actually two of the main lead singers, but Dino was the main lead singer. They actually have a one of my favorite songs by them. Probably the psychologist in me. Emotions make you cry sometimes, and I think I might have been prompted to listen to that, which then turned into this deep dive to find out about his death back in 2003. But he was in a space in his life of transition. So, if you know anything about H Town, you know a lot of their music was pretty sexually explicit, and they were young guys when they started out in the industry. So, of course, as they grow in age, they want to do different things. So, Dino had talked with the music label. He wanted to try different things with music. He wanted to go in a different direction. He'd become a father. He wanted to have music that his daughter, could be proud of. And so he didn't want to be talking about knocking the boots anymore. And he got a lot of pushback, not only from the record producers, but he got a lot of pushback from fans. You can go back now and look at even as he's dropping certain songs, the fans are like, look, I don't want to hear you singing a sultry love song or a song about being a dad. Like I want you to sing some songs that want to make me get naked. And so he really struggled with being kind of typecast, if you will, people not allowing him to be able to transition, to expand, to grow, to come into a different area in his life. And it led to some depression, periods of substance use, and probably almost near homelessness, if not homelessness. But he had gotten to a point, he was involved, his last relationship, his fiance, who was in the car with him and pregnant at the time of both of their passings. But he was scheduled to have a meeting with the record execs, him and the other two members of H Town. And when he didn't show up, his brother was like, "Nah, he's ready for this. Like he's in a different place. He's ready to transition to a different space." In his life and be able to look at what that would be musically for them as a group. And sure enough, he had gotten into a car accident. A life transition can be anything, right? Any significant change that shifts us, moves us from possibly one stage, possibly from a role we're in, possibly from a situation to another. Now, one of the hallmarks of a life transition is that there has to be, on some level, a capacity to be able to adapt. And it is difficult at best to adapt to transitions. There's a lot of different types of transitions. We'll get into that a little bit now as the weeks progress, more specifically talk about those different types of transitions. But it requires you to, one, have to adapt to something that is unfamiliar. But two, it requires you to take a look at if the strategies that you were using prior to the transition will be able to allow you to navigate through the current transition. Now, there are a lot of different phases of transitioning, and there's a lot of different models out there. But generally speaking, there is a phase where something ends. And this could be a job, this could be physical ability, this could be a death and loss, this could be a relationship ending, this could be transitioning to a different developmental stage, this could be a career change, any of these things, right? And so there is a phase where something ends. And then there's that middle phase of trying to navigate the ending of that thing. And then there is what we call the beginning phase, because it is a new beginning. It is the actual transition point, the change, the walking in the different you, the different experience, the different reality. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of emotions that can go along with those transitions, and a lot of just changes we can experience. You think about a shift in how you think, your emotions and how you feel. Your finances could really change with a transition. A lot of times with transitions, there might be a career change, there could be a geographical change, there could be changes in the relationships around us. The American Psychological Association states that, in this 2022 survey they did, that 72% of people question their life during a major transition. Because if you think about it, there's so much unknown, uncertain, fear. The transition phase is often one that we don't necessarily go into excited. Sometimes we do, but the major life transitions often are things that we didn't expect, didn't plan for, or maybe we expected them, but they came before we were ready. Now, what we know about life transitions, the big ones, the major ones, is that there is going to be a disruption. You are not going to experience the life transition and then go on with business as usual moving forward. Now, sometimes we're in a period of denial, and so we're not really ready to address it, and so we try to hold on to some things. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a sec. But there is going to be, and oftentimes is a major change to how you've been existing prior to this transition. There is usually a period of uncertainty, not knowing. And that is oftentimes where the fear comes in, is because we don't know what the future looks like. I don't know what the future looks like without this person. I don't know what the future looks like when my salary has been cut or I'm unemployed. I don't know about the future when I've got to make some decisions about this house. I don't know my future when my mother, who I love dearly, transition. I was caregiving for daddy and now he's gone, right? Like, so there are a lot of different ways your roles change, because who you were in relation to whatever the pre-transition part of your life was is forever altered after that transition. And then we get into that phase of we talked about, like, okay, I gotta adapt, I gotta adjust, and so now I gotta learn some new things. Oftentimes there is a process of not only learning new skills but actually challenging the way that we think about things. So there's a lot of, I think, adjustment in that phase of figuring out, okay, what, how do I get to the other side of this, right? Because again, our goal is to be able to begin this new phase. And sometimes, and this is not a, do want to let you know, much like the grief process, this isn't necessarily a linear process, because we might have a hard time grieving the ending of something. And that middle time could be back and forth between us grieving and trying to get over the changes. So it might be a good while before you actually are able to get to that phase of embracing this newness, or at the very least, learning to exist in it, even if it's not a warm embrace. It it is impossible for you to go through a life transition and it not alter you on some level. And if it changes you, then it's going to also change how other people see you as well, which I think is also one of the things we struggle with life transitions, is how others are going to perceive us in this transition. And then we talk about the emotional responses that could be all over the place, in terms of what we're experiencing. There's excitement sometimes on the one end, looking forward to, because not all life transitions necessarily are bad. They might be difficult, but they don't necessarily aren't bad. And so sometimes we're looking forward to a transition. Something happens, and it's an exciting time for us. We're walking in a new purpose. We're stepping into something. We're stepping out on faith. We're trying things that we wanted to do, and now the opportunity is there, and we're moving in a different direction. But on the other side of that, sometimes it's just more grief. I think even in transitioning into new exciting things, there's still some grief there. Sometimes, depending on the transition, there might be heavier experiences of grief. There are probably five major categories of transitions, and again, a lot of different types of transitions. But I would say the majority would fall in one of these categories. You've been actually dealing with transitions throughout your life. Your developmental years, when you transition from infancy to toddlerhood to being, a young tot, to then moving up, your elementary school, your middle school, high school, college. All of those were transitional periods. I would say probably the majority of you that listen to this podcast fall somewhere between your 30s and your 60s. So you've experienced a lot of transitions at that point, how you were in your teens versus your 20s versus your 30s, and beyond. And I think for most of us, if you think about it, those transitions came with changes in, might have been the way you thought about things, might have been how you approached your finances, how you manage your health, your relationships. You may have started to change your friendship patterns. So the people that might have been friends to you previously may not have gone in the next stage of transition for you, because there are some things that maybe you outgrew or you need different, and they didn't grow in that same way. Career changes, at this point in your life, you probably had a few. Some of you may be in a space where you're working multiple jobs right now. Others of you may be in a retirement space, or you may be thinking more about retirement. You may be in a phase right now where you are taking medication for the first time in your life, or you've had increases in medication. You might have more conditions that you're navigating through. You may be noticing changes in your energy, your memory, your sleep, your weight, your emotions. All of these are part of those developmental changes that can occur in our lives. I think then there's probably in alignment with that, the changes that you may have associated with your career and your education, right? Like we talked before about, you might be working multiple jobs, you might be in retirement, thinking about retirement. Um, some of you may be considering classes, you may be trying to pursue a degree or a license. You might be pursuing a certification. You might be at a place where you're entering a different workforce, or you're thinking about how you want to navigate the workforce. You might be in a position where there's a promotion, there could be a buyout of the company that you're working for. There, the layoffs we kind of talked about back in June. The retirement ages that people are kind of taking a forced retirement, if you will, to be able to get maybe 6 months of some benefits as they're trying to navigate finding another job. And then there are the people that, didn't get a heads up and were downsized, and literally their whole lives were changed. You might be thinking about a business. You might be growing a business. You may be retiring from a career and thinking about another career. So all of those are what we call major life transitions. The relationships, you all know that's a heavy one. Whether it is the birth of a child, the loss of a child, the ending of a relationship, the death of a partner, the death of a parent, the death of other loved ones, friends transitioning. Most of you all are probably at an age now where you've seen at least on some level some death. It could be an empty nester. You might have had kids at home who are now leaving home. You might be single and wanting to pursue marriage and looking at what social media has coined relationship mortality. Like, am I still in the range? I hear a lot of conversations about that. And people feeling like they have this limited amount of time to get married or to have children, and so they start feeling like they have to transition because they've gotten out of that age, or they should be concerned about it. I see that quite a good bit. Um, there's the physical changes that come along with our health. It might be chronic illness. It could be an injury that was pretty significant where you're going to have to make some adjustments. You could have a permanent physical disability that might have developed. You could have been in a car accident, had a stroke. You might have a progressive illness. So you're going to be experiencing more changes in your body. It again, you could be on medication for the first time. You could be in a position where you may be transitioning gender wise. You definitely, as my mama used to say, keep living. You're gonna see changes in your body, weight loss or weight gain, things being a little harder to tone up, and your hair. Changes in your hair. Your hair may be thinning. Your skin may be experiencing some changes. Your eyes, right? We out here driving by faith and not by sight. So there are going to be those things that happen that can be huge transitions because that can make a difference in a lot of other areas in your life. Then we have the changes where we move, we relocate. You may be, unfortunately, people are being deported, so you may be in a situation where people are going back to their home country, or you're having to make some decisions about that. You may be traveling to a place as a caregiver to relocate to take care of an aging parent, or spending more time facilitating that. So it may require you to travel a good bit. You may be navigating a job change, which could have you relocating to a different city or a different state. Um, might be downsizing, and so you may be moving to a different home, or you may be in a space where you're looking to purchase a home. You could be, active duty military. You could be a military spouse, and so there are a lot of different changes that can occur as a result of that. Some people are getting closer to their children, so they're relocating to where their children are, especially those that may have grandkids, or if you have a child with significant illness, you may be relocating to take care of them. So those are kind of the major ones as we think about transitions. So what happens as a result of a transition? A lot of changes. We've kind of talked a little bit about this, but what the struggle honestly is for us with the transitions. Transitions are a natural part of life. Like I said, you've been going through them since you came into this world. However, some of them affect us differently because we develop these schemas in our heads, right? Our mental representation of what our lives looks like, who's in our lives, how they function in our lives, what we're doing, who we are, how people see us, our health and our wellness, our identity. It could be your career, all of those things that make up a part of you, where you live, your financial stability, right? And then when a transition happens, what it does is it shatters that schema. It shatters that model, that representation that you have in the head, in your head. This rubric by which you have used to kind of govern yourself. Because we get comfortable, we get used to things, we exist in spaces for so long, it becomes a natural thing. We're used to having an order, right? A lot of us are very structured. You may not think yourself as such, but most of us have a routine and an order to how we approach our day and how we approach our lives. And because we struggle with that changing, essentially our brain is like, hey, 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 nah, we're not doing that. This is going to be the same, and we will work really hard to keep ourselves from actually having a transition. That's why sometimes we stay in relationships longer than we need to. That's why sometimes we get stuck in our grief, and we get to a point where we've almost built a shrine, because we don't want anything to be altered, because I want to keep this person here in some capacity. I can't, right? People will close those rooms off. They won't change a thing in those rooms. Nobody goes in their room. The clothes been in the closet for 20 years. All of that, right? Because it is such a jolting experience to have that kind of change that we struggle to be able to accept it, right? We talked about that adaptability piece that kind of comes along with transitions. Well, there's the alternative of not adapting, and what that can cause. And that is because, again, emotionally, we can be terrified. We might have a lot of anxiety, there might be dread, their loneliness, embarrassment, shame, hopelessness, worthlessness, all of those things on the spectrum of the stuff that can kind of get us stuck, if you will, and make it difficult for us to move forward in a transition. Now, on the other side, we can be very excited. We can be optimistically anticipating this new outcome. There might be peace that comes with this transition for us. We might be grateful once we've had a chance to kind of reflect on things about this transition. But it is important for us to understand what we're feeling and why we are feeling it in order for us to be able to effectively manage it. And typically, most of us, our coping mechanisms are going to be centered around our past experiences. What did you do before? Right? And then there's like, how motivated am I? What else do I have going on to be able to have the capacity to handle this transition? What kind of support system do I have in place? Do I have people that I can talk to, that I can connect with, that can kind of guide me, that can give me that hope and reassurance as I'm navigating through this? And then we also are people that generally do a cost benefits analysis, whether we're again actively thinking about it or not. Like, what's the cost associated with me accepting this transition, and what's the benefits of me not in this particular, like, everything is the same. So I do think it's important for us to really take a look at, how have I approached changes in my life? How have I approached transitions in my life? What kind of changes might I experience as a result of this transition? Because again, it could be financial, it could be emotional, psychological, geographical, it could be your career, it could be social. So all of these areas I really need to look at. Sometimes we're not even fully sure to what extent we might be altered with a transition. But when there are significant changes, there absolutely are going to be some things that are no longer going to be the same, that are going to need to be updated, altered. Sometimes we need to let go of them; they're not effective anymore. And I do, right. You all know I believe in a good team, and I think it's important that you look at who you may need to help you through this, right? That may be a medical staff, that could be, that plug for therapy was coming, psychological staff, that could be, it might be a financial coach, spiritual leader. Like, so you kind of looking at what all might I possibly need so that I can get my team in place, because that is ultimately going to allow you to be able to manage a transition better. And I do think it's important, in as much as we can't predict the future, we have some sense of what a transition is going to look like. And so it may be that I can maybe more gradually make changes and not big changes at one time. I talk to people, for example, after they've had a significant loss. Like, you don't make major financial changes, don't make big decisions about relocating, don't, right, when you are in that stage of early grieving, because you have so many emotions that it is going to be very difficult for you to make a decision that is going to be your most rational, constructive decision. It's going to be based on wherever you are emotionally. And then what people will do is they'll have regrets about the decision they made because they acted out of haste, right? Like, there are a lot of things that you need to kind of think about as you have these huge transitions in terms of some of the changes. So you want to be able to talk through those things first before you make any big decisions. And you want to allow yourself to be able to have process in the grief, unless you already had a plan that you had outlined prior to a transition. Some of you may have, like, hey, in the event I lose my job, in the event I lose my partner, in the event something happens with my children, in the event I need to caregive for one of my parents. Like, you might have already made these decisions prior to the transition, at which point follow your plan. That's fine. But you don't necessarily want to be doing that right away if you haven't made a plan. You want to give yourself an opportunity, and again, may be able to more gradually over time make some smaller changes toward that adjustment. And then, yeah, again, looking at your flexibility in being able to approach the situation, because oftentimes I feel like we want to handle things one way because that's the way we know, that's what we practice. We've talked about whatever you practice becomes your process. And so often when a transition happens, we're utilizing strategies that we would have used in other situations that may not be applicable to a particular situation, which is why oftentimes, right, like, we're running off automatic pilot and won't even remember, like, I said that, I did that. A lot of people in especially in this transition with jobs have, you essentially, when you are caught off guard, to some extent people knew some changes were coming, but when you're a good worker and you have been, like, you build trust with people, and you expect that that trust will be rewarded. And so you don't think somebody's going to come and tell you in mid morning, oh, your services are no longer needed. Your stuff has already been packed up. Please exit the premises. Like, that is such a betrayal. And so how you might respond is based on that betrayal, right? And so sometimes we're not cognitively in a place to be able to process because it's so emotionally overwhelming. And so you get the reaction piece. I do think it's important that you have some constant in your life when you're dealing with a major transition, a thing that can stay the same, right? For some people, that's their living environment, at least short term. Like, okay, I'll keep this the same as I'm navigating how to adjust to some of these other things I may be experiencing. For other people, it might be that go-to friend. Like, that's going to be the same. Like, the people I have in my life where I can go, my safe spaces. That might be what is going to be the constant in my life. But have a thing that is your constant. Now, that does not mean don't accept the transition. And so you're trying to force that to go back to what it was, which is impossible. And so you're trying to create a constant, but something that is healthy, because you need healthy support, you need healthy distractions, because you don't want to constantly also be thinking about the transition. When you're going through something that's very difficult, that's altering your life, you can get consumed with it. You can obsess over it. It's part of why we don't sleep and we're not eating, because we're up, mind's racing. And it will take you down into the abyss of significant depression or anxiety. When we talked about, we can get stuck in places, right? When you don't have any other information coming in and you just got your thoughts, it's a dangerous place to be in. So you want to make sure that you do have spaces where you're not focused on the transition, that you're cultivating and encouraging and supporting other aspects of self that are healthy. And that might mean you just celebrating, I got through the day today. Find something to be grateful for, to take your mind off of the obsession piece. It may be that you do focus on. I always say back to the basics. The basics are I'm getting an adequate rest, I'm eating healthy, I'm staying hydrated. I am, taking whatever I'm prescribed. So if you got medications that I'm regularly taking that, I'm not changing that up, that I'm getting my physical activity, that I'm making space for my spiritual wellness, whatever that is, prayer or reading scripture or Bible study or you may have a gospel station you listen to, but that you're nurturing your wellness areas, particularly intentionally during times of transition. And then I would also say, there is a support group, a self-help book to complement, you hear me, complement, not be a substitute for um, whatever you're doing in terms of if you're therapy or you got a financial consultant or you have a spiritual leader, that you have that also can just give you a good word, allow you to be able to put yourself in a healthier space as you're navigating the transition. I will also say that meaning and purpose is really important during transitions, and oftentimes as we're navigating transitions, that's when, if you remember my reference to APA earlier, that's when people start questioning themselves and questioning whether or not they have a purpose, and if there's any meaning. Every transition, there is something that comes with it. Again, some transitions are healthy transitions, they're good. They might be a little nerve wracking because it's different, but they may be something that's better for us. But even the ones that aren't planned, there's something that comes with them. Often that might be a lesson. Often that might be an opportunity to nurture aspects of yourself that you weren't nurturing. Particularly when I think about caregivers and when their care recipient dies, so much of their identity and so much of their time was devoted to caregiving that they often don't really nurture any other aspects of themselves. And so, even in the dealing with the grief and the loss of this loved one, it is important to be able to get that meaning and purpose regarding like how I want to leave my life moving forward. What is the legacy I want to have to honor the care recipient, but also to honor myself and the gifts that I've been given. And I tell people a lot of times we can be real disrespectful to God because we don't actually nurture the things, right? Because sometimes, because we can't do what we want to do, we don't do what we can do. And so we limit ourselves and not allow ourselves to see us in a space on the other side of a new beginning because it is uncomfortable for us. And so it's very important that you really think about like what is my next? Like what does that involve? What does that entail? And am I honoring myself and honoring those that love me in ensuring that I'm nurturing those aspects of self. Transitions are hard, everyone. I There is no doubt about that. No way around that. But we can, and we do it all the time. Do hard things. Okay, so glad to be back. We're in this transition series. If there is a particular topic that you want on transition, I'm going to hit relationships for sure. Um, and in the relationships, it'll be the transition from a relationship ending, the grief transition, as relationships are brought to an end, as well as transitions in our health and our wellness, and changes in the body and friendships, all of that. So I'll be hitting all of those things. But there may be a particular area of transition that you may be struggling with. And so drop me a message under this video and let me know. And I'll do my best to try to cover it in the next couple of months. All right. You all be well.